Welcome everyone. We here at City Forward Collective are excited to have you. We've been working with attending webinars ourselves with national organizations that have been doing some of the work a little bit longer, have been doing more virtual meetings, virtual learning, and learning a lot of great things. My colleagues and I went to a virtual session on unlocking the secrets to Zoom. And we've been hosting a few meetings the last couple weeks, and people have been really intrigued by some of the things that we've been doing and asking how can we do it or if there's training. So that's the session for today, learning how to use some of the neat interactive tools that Zoom offers. But before we get started, we're going to introduce ourselves. So I'm Jaribet Rodriguez. I'm the Director of Teacher Talent Initiatives. And what that means is that I'm working to build a stronger, more engaged teacher workforce in the city, focusing on Black and Brown educators as they make the smallest percent of our teaching population, while most of the students in our schools are students that are non-white. So that is my work here. Before that, I was the principal at Lincoln Avenue School in MPS for 5 years, worked as an assistant principal within the district, a teacher, and I also worked as a literacy coach at La Causa Bilingual School. So I'll hand it off to Melissa.
Hello, everybody. Melissa Caponegro. I'm the director of the Quality Schools Initiative here at City Forward Collective. I find myself always saying here at City Forward Collective, even though I'm here in my house, but I think you know what I mean. My work is really focused on conceptualizing a framework for measuring high quality in our city. Additionally, I support with coaching principals across the city as well. Prior to this, I was a school leadership coach with schools like Can, Milwaukee. And before that, I was a principal in Chicago, actually, where I was born and raised and had my roots. And now I'm here in Milwaukee. And after 2 years, I feel like I can finally call it home. And I'm excited to be here, really excited to share some of the Zoom offerings that we've learned about and that we have found successful these past few weeks as we are navigating the new normal. Spencer, I'll pass it over to you.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Spencer Sheen, and I'm manager of data and impact at City Forward Collective. And so my work is all things data for us. That goes to like school outcome data, everything with the report card, and evaluating our own impact. So looking at our program data. I'm also a Salesforce administrator for us, so I handle our fund development data. So lots of data work.
All right, thank you, team. So a little bit about City Forward Collective. City Forward Collective was launched actually this summer, and I just joined the team in October, so I'm one of the newest members here. But what our goal or our mission here at City Forward Collective is to ensure that every child in Milwaukee and every family has access to a great school. We have a 4-part strategy for this, family and community organizing. We really think that it's important in order for our schools to be the best and meet the needs of our students. We really need to ensure that we are listening to those that we are serving and that they're at the table making decisions alongside with their leaders and networks. Community informed policy. We know that there's some policies that are enacted that are actually creating more inequality in our system. So how do we identify? I do apologize. Working from home. How do we identify those policies and then work collaboratively to either remove them, update them to ensure that we are creating equitable systems here in the state and in the city. My bucket falls under effective and representative talent. That is looking at how teachers, leaders, principal managers, how do we select them and how do we ensure that we have the best and the brightest in front of our students, with an emphasis on Black and Brown teachers and leaders so that the students are represented in the roles throughout their schools, not just as paraprofessionals, that they don't see representation only as paraprofessionals or in the kitchen, which is what we heard a lot when we were interviewing, when we're talking to students, but that there's representation throughout entire networks and organizations. And our last bucket is quality schools. So how do we define a quality school and how do we invest in those schools that are doing great work for our students, for our families? How do we replicate those and expand? So those are our main areas. So for today's session, we will be actually practicing interactive tools in Zoom. And these are just best practices for any meeting that you're leading. So this could be a meeting with your staff, this could be a meeting with parents, this could be a meeting with stakeholders, or for some teachers, it might be meetings with your students. So how do you make the most use of the tools that are available and ensure that your meetings are engaging? Because we all know that listening to someone speak for more than maybe 10 or 15 minutes, even as adults, actually, we struggle with that long of time. But we know that we need to break it up, keep it engaging so that people don't lose interest. So you can look over the agenda and we will move into our first part.
Okay, so the first thing to chat about are session norms. The norms to the left are things that you have most likely seen in meetings while we're in our workplace. And so I really want to focus on the virtual norms and norms that in any meeting we should start thinking about. And so virtual norms consist of being on video. Best practice finds that participating and being able to see one another and interact with one another is really a way to connect. And please know that here there is no judgment. We understand you're working from home and it's okay if you're in your pajamas, but we'd love to see your face and interact together. Use the chat box as much as possible. As you saw on the front end of the meeting, we asked for you to start chatting who you are, where you're from, a joy that you've had in the past week. And as you saw, we started calling those joys out so that we could have somewhat of a conversation through the chat box. Make sure you jump in with any questions. That can be unmuting yourself so that we know that you'd like to speak, or throwing a question in the chat box. And then also mute when you are not speaking, but feel free to unmute for any responses. As we go through this session, we will be very, very meta about how we are thinking about setting up different sessions so that you understand from our end what best practices look like. And also, just so you know, and something that Spencer reminded me of right before this meeting, is that this is technology. It is not always perfect. I was saying that my anxiety for this meeting, because it's specific to best practices of using technology, my anxiety for making sure that it all ran perfectly was getting pretty high. And Spencer reminded me, like, hey, it's technology. We have to recognize it's not always going to work. So if we pull a poll up and it doesn't work right away, just bear with us. And whoever you're having sessions with, make sure that, you know, you talk about the honest truth about using technology. We know it's not always going to be perfect. And something else just to point out that isn't up here, but we also recognize that, as we've said, we're navigating this new normal and working from home and having to parent for some of us and be a teacher on the side, and doing all of these things is difficult. And so as you see, Jadi's son came in, and that's okay, and it's great. My 5-year-old may be running through the door at any minute. She's all dressed up as a princess today, so she's been showing off her outfit on Zoom meetings. So just know we are flexible with this, and so make sure that you understand that as well. It is okay if a little one or a fur baby or a spouse or a partner or anyone jumps in the background. We understand. So, all right, let's move on. The first thing that we are going to do is some community building. And so all we're going to do is practice using the chat box. And all you're going to write in there is what you're currently reading and if you'd recommend it to a group. As you're writing in some of your recommendations or things that you're reading that you don't recommend, we're just going to start talking out loud about what we're seeing coming through and create a conversation through this community builder. So go ahead, you can start chatting now. Just Mercy is a recommendation. Dare to lead, and it would be recommended by Jen. Great. Any others? Professional or just for enjoyment? A book on how to crochet. I love that. Learning something new while we're in our stay-at-home orders. Okay, if you haven't shared already and would like to, again, feel free to throw it in the chat box. And again, the chat box is just a way for us to communicate with one another. So use it as much as possible throughout this entire session. And when you're hosting your own sessions, just a reminder, you can chat to everyone or you can click a specific person. So when you're hosting sessions and you feel like someone's saying something that resonates with you and you want to follow up on, you can feel free to just chat that person individually and get more information. All right, moving right along. In our pre-meeting prep, oh, sorry, like I said, in our pre-meeting prep, as we're preparing for virtual meetings, we just want to make sure that you're thinking about a couple things. So the first and foremost is making sure that our expectations are aligned. So on our end, when we set up this Zoom meeting, we made sure that everybody could have their video on, that they would be in front of their computer, so that when you opened up your Zoom, that you could do those same things. It is an option when you set up Zoom meetings. We didn't have pre-work for this meeting, but best practice would say that within 48 hours, you're sending any pre-work or pre-readings prior to the meeting so that participants can be prepared for that. We'll talk a little bit about readings and resources following the meeting as well. We're creating a space for comments during the agenda so that we're really supporting engagement. So as we were planning out this PowerPoint, we thought about where can we have you all chat in the box, when are questions going to come up, things of that nature. So making sure that you're creating that space. If you're hosting a professional development, it's not just you talking for an hour about things that you want your staff or colleagues to know, but really you're making time for this engagement to happen. And then ensure everyone's aware of the purpose. So you'll see an example of what we sent out below, and which is why I hope that you're all here, is that you understood what we were asking. And so we make sure to let you know who we're targeting as the audience, what the topic's going to be, and what the purpose of the meeting is. And this is really important whenever you're hosting a meeting, so that you have the right people that are coming to these virtual meetings with you and are willing to learn what you're ready to share. So please make sure that you're making it as clear as possible. And this is just a way of thinking about how we set up the meeting. We'll go through some ways to engage during a meeting, but again, similar to what we thought about pre-meeting, is really how to build community amongst participants, because this way of interacting is difficult for all of us. We're in this isolation, and so video is part of that, so we can see each other and feel like we're in the same space, and really making sure that we're having conversations. Right now, even I'm talking a lot, but I promise we'll have more time to interact. Because that's one of the biggest things during a meeting, is to build community. Distribute time effectively, so that you'll see that Jody, Spencer, and I are all leading this meeting together, and you will see it's broken down where each of us are taking a piece, so that it's not the same person talking at all times. And we would highly suggest that when you're hosting a meeting, you have either one or two co-hosts with you, because one, it breaks up who's sharing, but also someone's there to support with technology and anything on the back end. We went through the norms, so we set up our norms, encourage collaboration and problem solving. We talked a lot about that. And then that ongoing engagement, going back to making sure we're engaging participants, which is going to be the focus of our share out today of best practices, is really how to engage others. So we are going to move right along to our first engagement piece. And prior to that, I just want to remind you all, if you have any questions about what was just shared, please go ahead, throw them in the chat box, and we'd love to answer them. Thanks, Jen. Glad you're still here.
Are you going to advance the slide, Melissa?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So we're going to dive into the meat of our section now, talking about these interactive engagement tools. So we're going to cover 4 of these here today. That does not mean this is a comprehensive list. There's a lot of ways to build engagement in a virtual session like this. But these are some of the more common ones, and in our opinion, some of the more useful ones. So we already saw the community builders. That was our question about what you're reading. Next, I'm about to go over live polling, and we'll see an example. Then we're going to cover real-time brainstorming, and we'll use some interactive documents with that. And finally, we'll experience virtual breakout rooms. And so that's basically a virtual way to put people in small groups. So before we launch our live poll, I just want to set the stage a little bit. And the first thing to say here is that you are not going to chat your responses. So you might read a question like this and see the answers and start, typing A or B or whatever your answer is. That's not how this is going to go. There's actually going to be a pop-up where you'll be able to select your response. Second, and Melissa already mentioned this, This is technology. It's new to a lot of us, and things might go wrong. So it's something to keep in mind. Have grace as you're going through it and as you're leading it, and probably have a plan B. Now it looks like Melissa has launched the poll, so everyone should see it. I see it on my screen, so it seems to be working properly. So our question is, which image resonates the most with you as you think about your current situation? And you can see that we have options A, B, C, and D on the poll. You can't actually include the pictures on the poll question. So a kind of workaround there is to include them in your slide presentation as we did here. So if you haven't already, go ahead and select your response and then hit submit. And we'll give everyone a few seconds to complete that.
Hey, Spencer.
Yeah.
Do you have any idea how this shows up on a phone? Because a lot of my students are doing the Zoom meetings over the phone.
I am not entirely sure how it shows up on the phone. Melissa or Jody, do you know?
Okay. I'm actually going to log in through my phone as well, just to kind of give me a better idea.
Okay, yeah. I would assume that they have that responsive capability built in, but I haven't experienced it yet.
I've experienced with my kids when I started going on to other classrooms just to kind of see what they're seeing, is that the screen is so small when you share like your screen, and and if you're doing a slide, and if it's not the full screen, then it's super tiny. They really have a hard time, seeing it, especially compared to a computer. So I was just wondering. I'll look at it myself right now.
Right.
Thank you.
And that's a really good point. And Brandy has commented she doesn't believe you can see the polls from your phone, but that's something we can confirm, and maybe by the Q&A section we'll have an answer for that. But now I think everyone should have their responses in. And so Melissa is the host for this meeting. So the host is the one who has the ability to launch the poll, close the poll, and now she just shared the results. And that's what I was afraid of. Most people are saying help. Well, hopefully we're giving you some of that help now, and you'll continue to get that help going forward. But also B and C, those are some fun pictures. Glad to see that. A little more optimistic. Now, you want to be sure to set up your poll ahead of time because it can take a couple minutes. Can we go? Yeah. And so to set up your poll, once you've scheduled your meeting within your Zoom account, so you sign into your Zoom account, schedule your meeting, and then you go to this poll section. And within the poll section, it gives you the ability to add questions. Now, a poll is basically a form. So if you're familiar with Google Forms, this is a very pared down version of that. So what you're going to do is you're going to write the question itself, and then you're going to select all the possible answers. And I say it's a pared down version of Google Forms because in Google Forms, you could have text boxes, you could have a matrix answer, all of those. But here you're only going to be able to have a single choice question or a multiple choice question. You also have the option to anonymize results. If you anonymize, then you're just going to get the responses to the poll. And if you don't anonymize, then you'll be able to see how each individual participant answered that question. So that'll be useful if you're trying to get specific information from people. Finally, after your session, you do still have access to the poll results, and that's through Zoom's reporting capabilities. So you can go again into your Zoom account and pull a report for that meeting and pull the poll results. So, as a data guy like me, it's good to know that you have those results going forward saved in your account. And I think that's all I have for the live poll. Oh, and finally, as I said, as the host, once you have your poll set up, you launch the meeting, and then you'll have this option, this down arrow here on the screen to launch the poll. And that's how you do it in the meeting as the host. And that's all it takes.
Thanks, Spencer. I see a couple questions popping up, so we're going to give you a second. If you have additional questions, please, again, throw them in your chat box. Nicole, the poll appears the same way on my end as it does for you in terms of the results. So I do not see which participants added or put in for each question on my end. It just shows the same graphic that you have. But again, as Spencer said, when you go in into Zoom following, you can pull up the poll results so that you have them. But I don't believe you'll be able to see the individual responses of that, unlike the Google form where you can break it down a little bit more. Jody, you're on mute.
Sorry, Spencer just went over that. It's, you have to select the not anonymous option, and then it will tell you who selected, who answered what question. The thing is that we have it under anonymous, so in the anonymous section, you won't get that response. But if you have the other option, then you will see who answered what. And the polls are accessible after the meeting as well, so that will stay.
Right, that's when you go to the report section of your Zoom account, you can access the poll results there.
Okay, so we're gonna move right along. Again, if questions come up, please feel free to throw them in the chat box. And as you know, you're thinking about questions, as we've said, like all of this is new for all of us. So if there's things that we cannot answer, we will definitely find the answer for you. But feel free to throw whatever answers or questions you have right in the chat box. Okay, so we're gonna move on to real-time brainstorm. This is another engagement strategy to support with keeping participants engaged in the session. The purpose is to develop content, gather ideas, engage staff or students in decision-making, and it's a great way just to generate notes. So if you have things that you want to be able to take away and you're facilitating on your own and you need some notes, this is a great way to get participants involved in writing down their thinking. So in a minute, I'm going to share a Google Doc with you all that has a question linked to it. As you can see, there are some directions at the bottom. If your name starts with an A through L, you're going to write one thing that has been successful in your time home and something that you ask others to try out or do as we're thinking of ideas when we're sitting at home all day. And if your name starts with an M through a Z, you're going to wait until we tell you to begin. So you're just going to read what people are putting in the Google Doc, put an asterisk next to anything you agree with, and then when we give you the prompt, you can go ahead and add additional notes. So right now I'm going to share the Google Doc. If it doesn't show up as a link for you, all you have to do is copy and paste it into your browser and it should pop right up. If you have any issues, please make sure to just type them in the chat box and let us know. And again, the prompts that we're using are just to really get us engaged right now in this these best practices. And so this is just a prompt in terms of what's something we should try or do while we're staying at home. What are some ideas you all have? Okay, if your name starts with an M through a Z, feel free to add an asterisk or add additional comments to the bottom.
So I'm seeing reading, exercise, trying to find time to exercise because we're not moving as much as we are used to when we're in the building. Document for calling. This will be a great document for calling families to update. Shared so we're not overwhelming shared with everyone so that we don't overwhelm any particular family. That's a great strategy. Getting on your bike and taking it for a ride. That sounds exciting. So I see a lot of movement coming up. So if you agree with any of those statements, just put an asterisk next to it. And if you have a different idea, virtual coffees and happy hours, those have been saving my life. But if you have an asterisk, make sure that you put that if you agree. If you have something new, then add that to the bottom. Keeping up a regular schedule. That's a goal of mine, but I have not gotten there yet. onboarding new teachers. Onboarding a new teacher right after that was a success. That should be very interesting, trying to do that all virtually.
Take about 1 more minute to finish up. Loving all these ideas though. As Jody said, a lot of movement, so different from what we're all doing right now in front of this Zoom convening. All right, thank you guys so much for sharing in that. Again, it's just a way for you to see how we can get people really to brainstorm in the moment and get engaged with one another. We've been using it a lot in some of our convenings to chat out successes that people have had and things of that nature. And so please make sure that you're using the Google Doc for these real-time brainstorms, and please ignore the typo that I see in the orange box on this slide.
Melissa,
Moving on.
oh, right before I move on, the virtual breakouts is going to be in. I have a question for Jen still. How did that onboarding work? Because I'm starting to see I saw a couple of questions come up with that one. So Jen, if you don't mind me calling you out.
No, not at all. And Melissa, you may have remembered you and I had a call back in, I believe January. And so I ended up resigning from a teaching position in Franklin Public Schools a week and a half before schools were shut down for COVID. And I started a new position in Wauwatosa Public Schools, technically on March 30th. So I haven't actually had any in-person contact with any of my new colleagues, and I've not been able to actually go into the school setting at all. And so it's been very interesting and very challenging. But Wauwatosa, well, I should say the alternative programs in Wauwatosa have really done a lot of virtual meetings. So they do a lot of meetings with just the school that I'm assigned to, but also all of the alternative programs. And they've tried to include me in PLC meetings and all sorts of things. They're sharing lots of documents with me, but it's a lot of self-guiding through what's going on at the school, and then just trying to observe as much as I possibly can from a virtual standpoint. So it's been very, very challenging in a lot of ways, but you know, it kind of is what it is. Fortunately, I'd gotten all of the logistical stuff in Wauwatosa done before the district itself shut down its central office. But like I said, I've had no in-person contact yet with any of my new colleagues. With that said, I also don't have a sense of the students that are in the facility, and I haven't really been able to jump in and help with any lesson creation or special education support because they're really kind of struggling to provide instruction there. And then also I don't really have any concrete frame of reference to be able to jump in. But I'm just trying to be open and ask a lot of questions and ask to sit in on a lot of things. And most of the time people are more than happy to invite me in just to be a listener and then be able to ask a lot of questions.
Well, thank you for sharing, Jen, but I think that's something that we actually have a session for upcoming for principals to start talking about onboarding as this might go into the summer and the fall. What is that going to look like for onboarding staff?
Sure.
You're doing it right at the beginning, but it seems that you're making the best of it, and we are all going to have to adjust. So going into our virtual breakout rooms, that is something that really excites me. I really find them useful. So one of the first things you want to do is make sure that your audio is connected. So that means that you are able to hear me. I think we did that at the beginning, and that your video is on. Something that we have not had happen to us yet, but that we've heard from other groups is that if your video and audio are not connected, sometimes your video goes to another room and your audio ends up in a different breakout room. So there's a little bit of a disconnect. So making sure that you are hearing and that your image that's on your screen matches you is important, so that you are your screen and your audio end up in the same room. So one of the first things you're going to do is if you have to be the host, you cannot be a co-host to control or start breakout rooms. So if you are the host, at the bottom of your screen, you will see breakout rooms, which is step 1. Now, the reason you are not seeing breakout rooms are 2 reasons. 1, you're not the host. Now, if you are the host of the group and you're still not seeing breakout rooms, that means that your account does not have breakout rooms activated. So you have to activate the breakout rooms, and it's usually a 2-minute process. It takes you longer to log in than to even click yes to have a breakout room. And we will be sending those instructions out after this session. The second step is determining how you're going to set up your breakout rooms. So your breakout rooms, you can decide by participants. So I have 100 participants. I don't want more than 10 in a room. So I'm going to have 10 breakout rooms, and that's going to tell me about 10 participants per room. Or your breakout rooms might be based on topic, grade level bands. They might be a group project, so you want to put the students together in a group. They might be by departments, by committees. That's something that you need to decide in advance. So you have 2 options. Once you decide how many rooms you need, then you have to decide how do you want people to be assigned to those, or participants to be assigned. The participants can be assigned automatically. That means I say I have 10 rooms, just divide everyone equally into each room, and those will be random assignments. Or if you don't want it to be random, you want to do that manually. Manually, you can do right in live, like as we're going to do now, or if you know your participants. For example, you're doing this with the classroom, or you're doing this with your staff, and you know all of your participants, and all of your participants have registered, you can set up the rooms in advance. So let's say I'm a building principal. I want to set up my grade level meetings for this meeting. I'll create 7 rooms from K3 to 5th grade and assign my teachers in advance. Sometimes that cannot happen. So for example, last week we held a session on for K8 teachers on virtual learning. There were 82 participants. We did not know all the participants, but we knew we wanted to have breakout rooms by grade level bands. So instead, what we did was we asked participants to identify their grade level by putting that number in front of their name. And we knew we wanted to have 3 rooms, an early childhood room, a upper elementary, and a middle school room. And participants were able to designate which one they wanted by putting that number in front of their name. And then we broke them out into rooms that way. So there's different ways. If you know your participants, it's easier in advance to set up these rooms. If you don't, there's still ways around that. So once you've decided how many rooms you want, and if you want them to be randomly assorted or manually, sometimes you're just going to do it manually because you don't want 2 students to end up by chance in the same room, or 2 staff members. So there are different reasons. You will select create breakout room. Once you select create breakout room, you will be able to open all the rooms, and everyone will receive an invite to their individual breakout room. So once you open the rooms, everyone will be sent to their rooms. And then your last step is managing. So while everyone is in their breakout room, you will be able to send out messages to participants. It's always best practice that if you're giving them an assignment, right when you open up the rooms, you send a chat message saying, remember, these are the 4 things you need to accomplish in this session. Make sure if they're going to share out, tell them, make sure that you establish who will be sharing out prior, and then start giving reminders. Oh, you have, this is a 2-minute countdown. Make sure that you've established who's going to talk on behalf of your group. This is a 1-minute countdown. And then once you're ready to call everyone back, you will hit close breakout rooms, and everyone will get a 60-second timer, and they will come back to the breakout room. So today we are establishing breakout rooms. We are doing it automatically or random. And the question that you have to discuss in your breakout room is one wish you have for students in Milwaukee during as we navigate the COVID-19 crisis. So in your groups, we're going to give you a few minutes to have this discussion. What is one wish you have for your students in Milwaukee as we navigate the COVID-19? All right, I think we have most participants back. So we did say that we were going to have 1 person from each group share out. So we had 4 groups. So who is the spokesperson for each group? We can have you unmute yourself and go ahead and share out what is that one wish your group had or you yourself had if you did not come to a consensus as a group?
I can start. Our group talked a lot about just the idea that we really just want to make sure that our kids are safe and healthy and have a really strong support system around them to be able to give them the essential needs at this time. We talked specifically about some of our youngest kids that are probably we're not making sense out of this yet, let alone, you know, a 3, 4, 5-year-old. So just trying to make sure that we're listening, and then our kids just have the support systems in place to be able to thrive and be resilient rather than be scared and fearful about the future.
Extremely important, those basic needs. Thank you. All right, that was one group. Another group ready to share out?
Yep, I can share out next. We were group 2. I guess if I had to blend what we talked about in our group is that we said that we wish that students had access to the things that they need so that their basic needs are being met and that their social emotional needs are being considered and met as best as we can right now, so that students can be motivated to engage in school. And understand how all those things are interconnected to students being able to either participate or even want to participate in school right now.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. Third group.
I don't know which group I was,
That's okay.
but I can go. Branching off of what the last 2 groups said, we also mentioned that you know, just basic access to internet, of course, we want that, but making sure that parents and families have the support they need in their own homes, that our students have the support there, and then along with that support, having a good work and school balance, knowing like how much to do and how much, you know, that they should, you know, be taking care of themselves as well. So, and just letting them know that we're here for them at our home, even though we're far away. So
That's important, making sure that they know that there's someone there. All right, and our last group.
I think I can summarize for our group.
Mhm.
Similar to what you said, there are a couple of things. First of all, that students have less stress because a lot of the kids in Milwaukee live in chaotic homes, and they may be responsible for taking care of their younger siblings if their parents are still working, or vice versa, they are being cared for by older siblings instead of their parents, instead of being in school where there's perhaps more structure. So that's one thing. And the other one is also piggybacking what somebody else has said. I would call it equal opportunity. I supervise student teachers in MPS, but also outside of Milwaukee County, and there is a vast difference in the resources available to the students, and the home life in many cases, and certainly in the expectations of the students. And I just feel like the divide is getting greater during this stay-at-home period of time.
Absolutely. I think we're seeing that. We're trying to figure out what that solution is, but like how everyone said, just making sure that the students have those basic needs. There is definitely, the playing field is not even. And then when we add access to technology, access to information, parent knowledge, we're just seeing that divide get greater and greater. So how can we support our students during this time to try to minimize those effects? We don't have the answers. Those are questions that we're still asking ourselves, but we are trying to convene people and work with national experts to try to see what we can do here in Milwaukee to help. But I completely agree in everything that you said, and I think the staff here at City Forward Collective is seeing the same. Thank you all for sharing. So Melissa, I'll turn it over to you.
And I'm on mute. I've always said if I had $1 for every time we were telling one another that, we'd be rich. It's always like, you're on mute, so I apologize. But anyway, thank you again for taking us through the breakouts, Jody. I always say she's the guru in the breakouts, and I had a lot of anxiety about starting those up, but they are a great way to really get people engaged with one another in a small group setting, because this can be overwhelming. And like she was sharing last week, we had 80 teachers in one session, and there was just no way that we could have everyone share out when there's that many participants. And so it's just a great way to make it feel like a smaller setting and you can be more engaged. Okay, so we talked about what to do before a meeting. We talked about engagement strategies during a meeting. And so a little bit about after a meeting takes place virtually, some things to consider. Always offer what we're calling a virtual water cooler. So just a space for reflections, remaining questions. Again, if someone's not feeling comfortable while everyone's online, they can stay after with the host and co-host and ask some additional questions. And so as we suggest, we will do the same thing here today, that we will stay on a little bit after if you feel like you have additional questions that we will try our best to answer. We've said from the beginning, we are not the experts, but we are trying our best to deliver information to you as best we can. And so if we don't know the answer, we will find it for you. Another thing to do after the meeting is to gather feedback on the strengths and the areas of growth. And so in a couple minutes here, I'm going to put a survey link into the chat box, and we just ask that you fill out the survey while you're in this space so we can get that information right away. As Spencer shared, he is our data guy, and we cannot thank him enough for always turning around our data quickly. So we'll have these meetings, and within, you know, not even 24 hours, he'll have the information back to us about whether or not it was a success, what are our growth areas. And so we really highly suggest that, even when it is with just students or just your staff, or, you know, if it's not this big professional development, it's really important to get some feedback. So, you know, as you're growing in this virtual space, things that can work better. Align your next steps. And so make it really clear after a meeting what you expect to happen. And so when you share out the email as well, you can share some resources that align with those next steps. And we highly encourage a follow-up email after any type of virtual convening. Again, just as another touch point of, hey, this is what we talked about. These were some suggestions that we had. Here are some resources or answers to questions that came up. And then we typically try and share some trends as well. And so that way you have in writing things that were shared, and we'll do the same thing today after this meeting. We'll take your questions, we'll find the answers from your chat box, and we'll make sure to get that back out to you. One thing that's not listed on here, but I would highly suggest, is we save the chat box following every meeting, because that is a way to have the information that you're asking folks right there on hand, and you can just sort through that the best way possible. But definitely I would suggest saving that chat box. If anything, it's just great to go back to, for example, when we were sharing joys, it's nice to just see some great things that are happening and look back on that. So it's time for some questions and answers. We're just going to take some space. Spencer, if you want to lead us through this, just for some questions.
I have a question. Is that okay? And
Yeah,
this
I
is
was about to say,
probably
please
like
pipe
a
up
really
if you have questions.
straightforward, but I haven't created a Zoom presentation myself yet to lead a meeting. Are you able to use either like Google Slides or PowerPoint in order to make like your part of the presentation, like what you've been showing on the screen, or is that something that you built in Zoom?
So we, go ahead, Spencer.
Melissa.
Yep. So we created this separately. We create the PowerPoint separately, and then we just share our screen. So it's not, we haven't created it specific on Zoom. And what we have found is that we share then, or we create a template for our PowerPoints that we just add on to that. It's easy.
Sure. Okay, so then you're just in either PowerPoint or Google Slides, and you're viewing that presentation on your screen, and then you're just sharing your screen. Okay, that makes sense. Thanks.
Yep. And I would, I'll make a note though, as the host in terms of managing the screen, it's a little difficult when you're showing a PowerPoint because it does take up pretty much the entire screen on my end. And so it's hard for me to get into any of my browsers to, you know, copy links and things of that nature. And so I set up the screen on one browser, and then on a different browser, I do our surveys and any engagement docs so that it's easy to access without having to stop the share.
Right.
Because it looks a little different on my end.
Okay. That makes sense though, that you would have one browser, one window open where you were just keeping the share, and then another where you were doing the launching of the other pieces during the meeting. So, okay, that's super helpful. Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
To go back to questions that were asked about the polling, I think someone typed in, do you need to have the paid version to participate in the poll? You do not. The host, I believe, needs to have the paid version, but the participants do not. And also, as far as participating from mobile device, according to Zoom's website, you can participate, but you need to have the app downloaded, and the host needs to be on the desktop client. So that's the version that would pop up outside of a browser window. I see a question, any tech tips? My Zoom seems to freeze a lot. I would say that the issue you're probably running into is internet bandwidth. So anything you can do to make sure your Wi-Fi is working properly for your Zoom meeting. It might be restarting your Wi-Fi right before the meeting, or making sure you don't have like someone streaming Netflix at the same time. Just protecting that bandwidth.
Yeah, I will second that because I've been having a lot of issues with my internet provider to the point that now I am not the host to any meeting because we have not been able to solve it. But yes, usually it has to do with your internet and your band.
Other questions?
I'll just extend on the response that Jody gave to Nicole about the chat box. Yes, you can copy and save it. The easiest way to do that is where you can select who you want to chat to. There are 3 little dots, and so that's the space that you save the chat box. And what I have found to be best practice for that is right when it says it's been saved, there's an option to show in folder, and I click on that right away, and I save it to my desktop. You can go back into Zoom and find it that way, but it's easier just to save to your desktop right after you show it in the folder so it doesn't get lost in translation. We cannot thank you enough for taking the time. We know that things are extremely busy right now, and so we appreciate you taking this time, and we hope that some of these practices will support your virtual convenings and distance learning practices in the future, but we are here if you need anything. Thanks so much. And again, click done when you are finished with the survey.